بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. اللهم افتح لنا فتوح العارفين ووفقنا توفيق الصالحين. اللهم علمنا بالقرآن وذكر الحكيم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما يقربنا منك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا سهلا. اللهم أعذنا من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا واصلح لنا شأننا. لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. نويت تعلم وتعليم والنفع انتفاع التذكر تذكيرا والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على تمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. وادع على الهدى دعوة الخير ابتغاء وجه الله مرضاته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى. So alhamdulillah, we reached the makruhat of prayer, or it's the disliked actions within the prayer. So again, within the Maliki school, the disliked actions are the when we say disliked or makruhat, we mean the mildly disliked actions. So there's no punishment associated with doing any of these actions, technically speaking, but there's a reward related to leaving them. Right? There's a reward related to leaving them. So there's no punishment, again, associated with doing these actions, but there's a reward for leaving them. So alhamdulillah. So we did the pillars of the prayer, we did the confirmed sunnahs of the prayer, we did the non-confirmed sunnahs of the prayer, we did the recommended actions of the prayer, which is the mandubat, and these are the makruhat. So these are what you don't want to do, right? Okay, so what are they? Okay, so the Maliki is a little bit different than some of the other schools. So saying the Bismillah in the obligatory prayer is disliked. Saying the ta'awudh, so the A'udhu Billahi Minash Shaitanir Rajeem in the obligatory prayer likewise is disliked. And then any dua, whether it's before the Fatiha or during the Fatiha or after the Fatiha, likewise in the surah, or before the surah or after the surah, meaning the surah after the Fatiha. So you would just basically, while you're standing, in majority of the prayers, all that you're doing is you're reciting the Fatiha. You just start with Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, and then you go to the Fatiha. You go to the surah. That's it. And then really the only prayer where you would do something else is in the Fajr prayer, in the fard of the Fajr prayer, in the second rak'ah, after the surah, you would recite the dua of qunut, which we took last time. So inshallah, that's on the recording from lesson 11, sorry. So dua while bowing, which is doing the ruku', that's also makruh. Prostrating on one's garment, hijab, turban, etc. It's makruh, so it's not sinful. Again, it's not sinful, but there is a reward associated with leaving it. Right? I know in some of the other schools, like one of the other schools, it's actually sinful to prostrate on one's hijab. So I've had, when I was in one Muslim country, I was standing in line, congregational prayer, and when the sister, she moved my hijab off my forehead, and then I think somebody told me that it's actually wajib to have the forehead uncovered in their school of thought. So alhamdulillah. I don't think I said anything, so alhamdulillah. I don't think, when at that point when you're getting ready to pray, it's just better to kind of not talk, because it just takes away from the prayer. So reciting the Quran, and it's makruh in the Maliki school, so reciting the Quran while bowing or prostrating, right? Because this is not a place, it's not a place for the Quran. Unless one's reciting du'as from the Quran, then it's okay. And then for the one who speaks Arabic, to recite du'as within the prayer in other than Arabic. Right? For somebody who knows no Arabic, and they can only recite du'as in another language, then it wouldn't be disliked. Turning around unnecessarily with the neck or the body, that would be makruh. Right? Unnecessarily. And then closing the eyes. There is some leeway. There's some leeway given to if there's external distractions. You know, so somebody comes and stands right in front of you and they're wearing something really bright, pink, or, you know, or people are doing all kinds of stuff in front of you, walking in front of you, their kids. And a lot of people don't know the rulings of the prayer. And a lot of times people don't know that it's actually not permissible to disturb somebody who's praying. So sometimes people will be doing something in front of us. And I get easily distracted in the prayer. So there is leeway to actually close one's eyes for if there's external distractions. And Allah knows best. Is saying Alhamdulillah after one sneezes. So after your own sneeze to say Alhamdulillah, it's makruh. But it's not prohibited. Placing the feet together, right? Raising one foot, right? Unless it's due to lengthy standing, then, you know, if one just needs to take a little bit of a rest, one can raise one foot and then, you know, put it back down. Placing one foot on top of the other. Reflecting on worldly matters, Allah forgive us for that. Unless it's just thoughts going in and out. You know, if it's just the thoughts that one can't control. In one of the classes, we took the different types of thoughts and the strength of them. So if there's just basically the khawatir that are just going in and out, and one doesn't have control over them, those just go in and out. So we shouldn't, you know, hold on to the thoughts. They go in and out. Those one doesn't have control over. But actually reflect, ponder on worldly matters, that would be makruh. And it takes away technically from the reward of the prayer. There's a really beautiful section in Akhdari on this aspect. It's right after the reprehensible acts of the prayer, or the makruhat of the prayer, where he talks about al-salatu nurun azimun tashaqqu bihi qulub al-musallin, that the prayer contains a great spiritual light by which the hearts of those who pray are they're enlightened. It as Shaykh Hamza puts, it radiates in the hearts of those who pray. وَلَا يَنَالُهُ إِلَّا الْخَاشِعُونَ, and only those who have khushu' attain that. And Shaykh Hamza translate it as humbly the person who's humbly submitted himself. So this is only the first part of this section where he talks about the inner aspect of the prayer, but it's really, really beautiful. So anybody who has the Akhdari, the Arabic, and they can read through it, they should read through it. It's really, really beautiful, inshallah. Maybe at some point I can translate it and add it maybe at the end, inshallah. Placing, let's see, carrying anything distracting in one's sleeve, so likewise one's pocket, one shouldn't have anything, fiddling with one's beard or anything else. So anything that's going to distract one from the prayer, oneself from the prayer. Placing hands on the waist, cracking one's knuckles, praying on luxurious prayer mats. So generally majority of these prayer mats, they're makruh to pray on. And if they're very thick, then it would be actually impermissible to pray on them. But the prayer is still valid. If they're excessively thick, then they're actually impermissible to pray on. But the prayer is actually valid as long as one has, the forehead was still on the ground, stationary, and one wasn't praying, for example, on like a waterbed or something where, the water is constantly moving and one didn't have stillness and one wasn't able to rest one's forehead. In that case, the prayer wouldn't, the sajda wouldn't be valid. But these other situations, like these slightly thick prayer mats, these luxurious ones, it'd be makruh. And if they're excessively thick, then it's actually not permissible to pray on them. So I just, what I do is, if you're in a masjid, you're not responsible. So they place the prayer mats, and that's not your responsibility. If I'm in somebody's home and they have a place where I can not pray on those thick rugs, I'll do that. If it's somebody I know well and it's not gonna, cause any hardship for the person. So, and I have one of those portable prayer mats. It's very, very thin. Ideally, if one's able to, one wants to pray directly on the ground. Ideally on the sand, because it's natural, right? And anything natural if one can't pray directly on the sand. If one can't pray directly on the ground, then something natural, but it shouldn't be thick. Restricting oneself to a specific number of tasbih, like Subhana Rabbil Azim, Subhana Rabbil Ala, while bowing or prostration. So one shouldn't specify a number. Like in some of the other schools, they specify a number. You have to do so many tasbihs in ruku or in bowing or prostrating. The Malikis would consider that makruh to specify it every time. Likewise, specifying the wording of the tasbih and leaving out other forms of tasbih. So always saying Subhana Rabbil Azim or always saying Subhana Rabbil Ala. So one should, sometimes one can do La ilaha illa anta subhanaka inni kuntu minadh dhalimin. In fact, they recommend that as if one's new on the path and, one grew up as a non-practicing Muslim and one is coming back on the path, there's going to be a lot of darkness in the heart from the sins, because there's, maybe somebody left the prayer, so there's all that darkness. So it's recommended in some of the books of Islamic character, they recommend to do La ilaha illa anta subhanaka inni kuntu minadh dhalimin, to do that often in the sajda specifically. And clearing one's throat to get somebody's intention, that's makruh, but the prayer is sound. Okay. Saying subhanallah to someone who calls the person praying, it's makruh, but the prayer is valid. To correct the imam, unless he waits for you to correct him, in which case it becomes mandatory. But if the imam makes a mistake in the prayer, because the Fatiha is mandatory to recite, then one must correct him, even if he doesn't wait. Okay, and then I just made a chart of du'as makruh while bowing, before, during, after Fatiha or Surah, before, after the first tashahhud, the first sitting. So after in the first sitting, one does the Attahiyatu Lillahi, and then one can do the prayer upon the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in any form, if one likes. There's difference of opinion in the first sitting, whether it's makruh or it's recommended. So I actually do it. I actually do the prayer on the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in the first sitting as well. But any other dua after the first, in the first sitting after the prayer on the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, if one's doing that, would be makruh. If one uses the same wording each time, that's also discouraged. One's making the same dua over and over again. It's also going to lead to one losing one's attention in the prayer. And in one of our classes yesterday, we were talking about, there's a hadith that's mentioned that one of the reasons that dua is not answered is if one is heedless, one is making dua. Or the lahin, yalhu, alatul malahi, those instruments that entertain. So basically, if one doesn't have focus when one's reciting dua, it's one of the means of the dua not being accepted. So it's good to change the wording. Incidentally, the dua, inshallah, I'm just gonna, I have a whiteboard here, so I might write some of the dua and some of maybe the form of the shahud and the Salat Ibrahimi on the board, and maybe take a picture, and then I can post it either to the group, or I can actually post I can make a short video or include it in the next class, the different wording of the recitations in the prayer, because the recommendations are, slightly different sometimes from one school of thought to another. But if somebody does another recitation, as long as it's valid, it should be okay. Okay, so missed prayers. So one makes up missed prayers according to the order in which they were missed and according to one's legal state when missed. What does that mean, legal state? So if one missed a 4 rak'ah prayer during a legal travel, then one makes it up accordingly, i.e. as a travel prayer. So right now you could be at home and you're making up some prayers. One, you can make them up anytime. So you've prayed Fajr and you're sitting there doing dhikr. The best thing to do is do the fard, to make up the fard. So you would, even if you're at home, but you had a prayer you missed during travel, you make it up as a travel prayer. And they're made up any time of the day and night, even while the sun is rising, setting. I mean, if one's praying around other people and they would have a problem with that, then one needs to be discreet, or maybe one can explain that to people. Because in some of the other schools, certain, like when the sun is rising, when it's setting, and when it's directly overhead, at the zenith, one wouldn't be praying. One shouldn't be praying any prayer. So, but for the Malikis, the make-up prayer it's fard prayer, and one could die anytime. One doesn't know, so one makes them up at any time. Okay, the one who owes 4 prayers or less must pray these make-up prayers first, in order, of course. That's generally speaking. Even if it entails a lapse of the current prayer time. So say it's Maghrib and you go, oh no, I didn't pray A'udhu Billah. Fajr, Dhuhr, Asr, and now it's Maghrib. Now, if I pray these make-up prayers, my Maghrib is going to go out. You still pray the make-up prayers. It's 4 or less. There's difference of opinion about if 5 is considered a small number or not. So for 5, there's difference of opinion. Would you, is it considered a small amount? Would you pray those 5 prayers before you did the prayer that is in now? For example, Maghrib. But 4 for sure. And I would make Tawbah as well. If one owes prayers that share a time, one must pray them in the order they were missed. Otherwise, the prayer is invalid. So if you know which, first of all, which prayers share a time. This is a chart from one of our previous classes, right? Dhuhr and Asr share a time, right? So if I know that I need to make up Dhuhr, and I'm praying Asr first. So here, we said Dhuhr and Asr. Here, we'll start here. Zawal is when the sun starts going down. That's when Dhuhr comes in. So that's a preferred time, right? Or the Mukhtar time is from when the sun actually starts going down, and it's visible with the naked eye with the shadow increase. All the way up to when Asr comes in, right? So the object is its own height. So you have your shadow at Dhuhr, and then you have its own, then you have the length of the object, right? And so the shadow has reached that height past the initial height at zenith, and now a whole nother length of the object. That's asr. So dhuhr is still in. It's just it's not qada for dhuhr when asr comes in, right? Dhuhr is still in, but it's impermissible to delay it till the time that asr comes in, right? So these two share, and then the daruri, the necessary time for dhuhr and asr, is from when the object reaches twice its height. So when basically the Hanafis pray according to Imam Abu Hanifa, when they start praying, that's the necessary time for the Malikis for asr. So now we're in the necessary time for dhuhr and asr. So you're here, right? And it's before sunset. And you haven't prayed, somebody hasn't prayed dhuhr. And they intentionally go into asr, and they know that their dhuhr is, they didn't pray dhuhr. Their asr would be invalid. And likewise, Maghrib and Isha share a time, right? Maghrib comes in when we mentioned if you look in the eastern horizon, because the sun sets in the west, alhamdulillah, it's still setting in the west. And so if you look in the eastern horizon, you'll see this bluish, grayish light that spreads across the eastern horizon. And that's when Maghrib is in. And then Maghrib basically goes out. There's two opinions for Maghrib. There's one opinion that once you do the conditions of the prayer, you call the iqama, you call the adhan, the iqama, and you pray the prayer, that's it. The time of Maghrib is out. The other opinion is that as long as there's red, orange hues in the sky, reddish oranges, shafaq al-ahmar, it's called, i.e. Isha is not in, Maghrib has not gone out. So there's another opinion that Maghrib, the time of Maghrib goes all the way up to Isha. And Isha comes in when all the red, the orange, those colors have disappeared from the sky, even if there's white light out. As long as there's only white light out, Isha is in, right? And then they share. So at that point, it would be the daruri for Maghrib once Isha comes in. And then past the first 1/3 of the night, Isha and Maghrib go into daruri all the way up to Fajr. Right, so this is the time they share. So somebody wouldn't wouldn't pray Isha knowing that they owe Maghrib of that day. Is that clear, inshallah? So I'm going to move to the next slide if somebody has questions. Okay. And then I wanted to go over somebody who has make-up prayers. So the one who owes fard prayers may pray only the following sunnah prayers. The shafar are the 2 rakahs before witr. Even though they're nafil, but they take the ruling, you pray them like a sunnah because you need to pray them. You can't pray the single witr on its own. It's makruh to pray it on its own. So you would pray 2 shafar before the 1 witr, even if somebody has make-up prayers. And he mentions in Akhdari that it's makruh to even speak in between the shafar and the witr. So one has to be careful. One does salam after the 2, and then one gets up immediately and does the witr, the single witr. And then in the witr, it's recommended to recite Qul huwallahu ahad, Qul a'udhu birabbil falaq, and Qul a'udhu birabbin nas. So, and then the fajr, the 2 non-fard rak'ah at dawn, so that's before the fard, right? We said those are called fajr. In the Maliki, those are called fajr. And the actual fard is called the subh prayer. So when you're making your intention, which is in the heart, the intention that you're making for the non-fard is fajr. And the intention is at the time of the Allahu Akbar, right? So at the time one's saying Allahu Akbar, one's making the intention in the heart to pray Fajr. And then for the fard, one makes the intention, again, when one's saying the Allahu Akbar, one's making the intention at the time one's saying Allahu Akbar, and one says in the heart, Subh. This is the Subh prayer. Both Eid prayers, right? And in the Maliki, if one missed in the congregation, one would pray Eid prayer at home. I know in some of the other schools it's not prayed at home. Or at least in one of the schools I asked one of my teachers, she said they don't pray them at home. If it's missed, it's missed. But the Maliki, if you missed their Eid prayer in the congregation, you should pray it at home. And the solar eclipse, not the lunar eclipse, because the lunar eclipse is a nafil prayer. The solar eclipse it's the one it's done during the day. It's done in congregation. It's a long prayer. So that's a sunnah. So one should do that, even if one has makeup prayers. And seeking the rain prayer or istisqa, one would do that as well. Even if one has makeup prayers. Any other prayers, even istikhara, it's actually prohibited to pray them. So not tarawih. I know in some of the other schools, like the tarawih is a confirmed sunnah, so they actually have to pray they're supposed to pray the tarawih because it's a confirmed sunnah mu'akkada, even if they have makeup prayers. But in the Maliki, one wouldn't pray them. The best thing is in Ramadan is to do the fard. It's certainly higher than to do a nafil. So, and the reward is higher to do a fard in Ramadan. It counts as 70 fards in Ramadan. So just to recap, the one who owes prayers is not allowed to pray nafil prayers. You know, I know, alhamdulillah, the people that do istikhara, it's great that you're doing it. There's another dua that you can do. It's in the Reflections of the Pearls. Allahumma khilli wakhtalli. Allahumma khilli, give me khair, like wakhtarli, and choose for me. One can do that. And maybe, you know, I haven't thought about this, but I haven't asked this, but I mean, maybe one can just do the dua of istikhara without the 2 rak'ah. I don't know if what the ruling is on that, but I mean, it's the dua. So maybe after a fard prayer or after a sunnah prayer, one could, you know, recite the istikhara dua. That's an option. Unfortunately, that's a dying sunnah for people who don't have makeup prayers. People don't do the istikhara regular, and there's just so much benefit in that. One of the Sahaba mentioned that the Prophet ﷺ would teach us the dua of istikhara like he taught us an ayah of the Quran. So it's really important and saves a person a lot of grief. Just asking Allah for, you know, for assistance and it shouldn't be just, you know, a lot of times people will, alhamdulillah, at least they're doing it. They might only do it for marriage or for work or something really important to them, but it should be for a lot of things. There's a lot of things that, you know, should I go visit this person? It's not a specific recommendation to visit them, and somebody might have something else to do that's equally important. So one has 2 matters that are equally important. Which one should I do? Right? Well, obviously one wouldn't make a istikhara for a fard. For a fard prayer or for fard and classes or to attend, you know, anything that is fard, obviously one wouldn't do istikhara for them. Imam Sha'rani, one of my teachers, mentioned that he would do istikhara for the day. That's like a general meaning of istikhara. It's like a more general meaning. Just he would just do it for the day. That, you know, Allah, I'm just, you know, pray 2 rak'ah nafil and do the dua after, and just make the general intention. Like, Ya Allah, you know, this is for anything in the day. Please choose for me. But the more specific meaning and generally what's taught, obviously, is going to be the one where you have 2 choices and both things are equally important. They're recommended acts. So there are two recommended acts. One is not higher than the other. And that's why it's also important, if one doesn't know, is this act recommended for me or is it wajib for me? One should ask, or I'm actually doing istikhara for something that's actually prohibited for me. Right? So if once one knows the ruling and one knows one has two acts and they're equally important, they're both recommended, then one does istikhara. And one should do it for 7 days. And, you know, the hadith don't talk about, from what I've learned, the hadith don't talk about having a dream. That's like an extra bonus, alhamdulillah. That's like the mubashirat that I mentioned in some of the hadith. That a true dream that a person sees either for himself or that's seen by somebody else for him. So, but it's basically what's mentioned in the hadith is the inshirah of the qalb, the heart finding ease in that matter. You know, that one doesn't feel this, oh gosh, I really don't want to do this. So, and one of the other things that the scholars will mention is that sometimes we go into the istikhara and we already have, you know, we've already decided what we're going to do. So we need to really try hard. And I've been, you know, reminding myself of this, that I shouldn't have made up my mind already about what I'm going to do, because that's going to affect how I read the istikhara. Because after one makes the dua, one thinks about how one feels at that point. But if one already has made up one's mind, one's gonna misread the istikhara because one's already biased. So something to an FYI. Okay, and then the rest in the slide, it's just a repeat of the last slide. The witr, which is sunnah, as well as the 2 rak'ah shafr before it, one continues those. The one prays the fajr, the raghiba, before the 2 obligatory dawn prayer, and does both the Eid prayers and the solar eclipse prayers. Salat al-kusuf. The khusuf is the qamar, is of the moon, when the moon is eclipsed. So obviously that's going to be at night. That's a nafil, so one wouldn't do that. And then beseeching, or the istisqa, the rain prayer, right? One should do that. And then I have, okay, I don't know, oh, I guess it is clear. I'm just going to do, hopefully this won't take more than 10 minutes, 15 minutes. If due to an illness or weakness one is unable to pray standing without support, or leaning against an object without undue hardship, and I'm going to go to the next slide in a minute, then one would pray leaning against something. So the order of the next slide, that's obligatory. And then, so I made 2 slides. The first slide is the obligatory order, and if one can't do any of those, then one goes to the recommended order. Okay, last bullet point here. The one able to stand may pray the nafil prayer sitting, but the reward is half of the one who prays them standing. So fard prayer one can't do sitting if one can pray standing, right? But the nafil one can do sitting, unless if you went into a nafil and you intended to stand for the nafil, then you can't sit. But if you didn't intend that, and you know you sit in the nafil, it's and one's able to stand without undue hardship, then the nafil is still valid. It just reduces the reward. Okay, so this is the obligatory order. Is standing without support, which is what most people do, right? Most of us, alhamdulillah. So if you lean against something, but say I'm leaning against like a pole, and somebody came during the prayer and they removed the pole, and I wouldn't fall to the ground, that's makruh, to lean a little bit. But if I was leaning such to where if they remove that thing, I would actually fall, so I'm completely leaning against something, you know, just I've put all my weight on that thing, and if they remove that thing, I would actually fall. That would invalidate my prayer if I don't need to lean, right? So a little bit of leaning is makruh, right? Obviously, if there's a valid reason, it's, you know, that's different. So the obligatory order is standing without support, right? Standing with support, right? So leaning against something, like I mentioned, against a pillar or against the wall. And then sitting without support, right? Sitting on the ground with sajda on the ground. That's the second step, third step. So a lot of times people will go, they'll do standing without support. I don't know how many people actually do this, standing with support, which is obligatory to go from first to the second step. And then I've noticed people when they go to sitting, they actually do it in a chair. The problem is that if they can actually do sajda with, and they can put their forehead on the ground, they would actually, they won't be able to, it's not permitted for them to pray in the chair. Because when one goes to the ima position, ruling ima is when one's motioning for the bowing and the prostration. That's actually a weak, it's a weak position. So if one can pray, because one has left sajda and the ruku, these are pillars in the prayer, one can't leave them unless one's not able to do them. So if one can actually do sajda on the ground, one needs to sit on the ground. So sitting on the ground without support and actually doing sajda on the ground. And then sitting with support, so just sitting on the ground, leaning against a wall or something, right? So again, one doesn't leave the sajda on the ground or the actual bowing unless one's not able to do it. And there are situations when one cannot, you know, when there's people who, they can't bend their knees, or somebody who had they're torn their part of their ligament in their arms. So actually they couldn't put their hands on the ground, and they, you know, one can't really do sajda with one hand on the ground. Maybe some people can, but it needs a lot of body strength, upper body strength. So this is the obligatory order. And then one would go to the recommended order. So if somebody can't do this order, so if not one, then second step. If not second step, then third step. If not third, then fourth. If one can't even sit without support, Allah protect us from this. Then lying on one's right side facing the Qibla. And then this order is recommended, right? So if one switched the order, it's one didn't do anything prohibited. It's recommended. So lying on one's right side facing the Qibla. You know, this is how they lay the dead in the grave, the deceased in the grave, facing the Qibla. Lying on one's left side facing the Qibla. So interestingly enough, this is also how we're supposed to sleep. And you'll notice, subhanAllah, that I've noticed that if I don't sleep, if something happens and I sleep on this side, left side, the dreams are not good. So lying on one's right side, facing the Qibla, but in the prayer it's recommended. It's, you know, it doesn't invalidate the prayer going out. Or lying on the left side, facing the Qibla, lying on one's back with feet towards the Qibla. And again, one may perform nafil prayer sitting, even if able to stand, but the reward is diminished. It is half of the one who prays standing. Okay, and then I made a chart on somebody who can stand only. So they cannot, I don't know how clear this is. I think it's a little bit blurry maybe. So this is the last thing we're going to do. Still a little bit blurry. Okay, there. That's a little bit better. Okay, so somebody who's able to stand only. So for some reason they can't sit, but they can stand for the whole prayer. Like somebody who has knee, they can't bend their knees, but they could actually stand for the whole prayer. Or they would need to stand for the whole prayer. So then what do they do for the bowing and the prostration? So then you motion. So the prostration is lower than the bowing, right? And so somebody who can stand only for the entire prayer, so for the prostration, what they can do, what do they do with their hands, right? They can either keep them to the sides, or what is recommended, what's higher to do is place your hands, like put your hands in front of you with your palms to the ground. So if you stand and then you put your palms, put your hands with your palms facing the ground right in front of you. That's what's recommended. Because they say in the commentary that then your hands actually have a portion of the sajda. You know, when one does sajda on the ground, that it's recommended to have it's sunnah to have your hands close to your, like by your ears. And so if one's standing, they say it's higher to actually have your hands in front of you with the palms facing down. But if one kept them to the side and just did the motions for bowing prostration, that's fine too. And then if somebody can stand and sit, but they can't bow, so they can do two things. They can stand and sit, but for some reason they can't bow. Or something's wrong with their back. You know, there's this is mentioned in Khalil, so these two positions. That's why I made this slide. So what they would do is they would bow while standing. Right, one bends forward and back. I think it's called genuflect, bowing. And then for prostration, one's unable to prostrate with the forehead, but one can actually sit. So then when one needs to prostrate, one would sit down and just leans forward towards the ground, and with the hands placed on the ground, right? That's ideal, with the hands placed on the ground. But one does need to motion towards the ground with one's, so lean forward and then back. So inshallah that's clear. So that is the end of lesson 12, unless there's questions. Or you can post the questions to the group. Jazallahu anna Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam ma hu ahlu. Jazallahu anna Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam ma hu ahlu. Jazallahu anna Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam ma hu ahlu. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا. Okay, so that is the lesson for today. So inshallah tomorrow is the 10th, so we're going to do these two special lessons. One I wanted to make up last week's lesson, and then since tomorrow is the 10th, I figure there's nothing better to do than to do a Fard Ain class. This is sitting on the ground. Yeah, sitting on the ground. Sitting on the ground. Stand and sit on the ground. One doesn't go to the chair unless one can't do it on the ground. Yeah, it would be on the ground. So they mentioned that the hands placed on the ground. So if one can do it on the ground, one would do it on the ground. I know sometimes people have really severe knee issues. So although they should get hijama done. I know somebody who's had meniscus tears and they've been getting hijama done. And they're actually on their knees. And they almost went for surgery, and they've had hijama done regularly around the knees, not on the knee. You don't do hijama on the knee, but around the knees and on the back, just some of the sunnah points, recommended points, and they're actually able to pray with full movement, the prayer properly. So alhamdulillah. Okay, so inshallah tomorrow at 10, if that works. Inshallah, we'll do 10 again to be consistent. Okay, jazakallah khairan. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Jazakallah khairan for attending.